Hey there, this is Dr. Mort Orman, and today we're going to be looking at part one in the book, the relatively new book called The Code of the Extraordinary Mind. And part one is all about living in what the author Vishen Lakhiani, founder of Mind Valley, calls the culturescape. And the culturescape is basically all those ideas and rules and principles that have been passed down from generation to generation in various cultures that we live in that kind of get embedded within us and give us certain views of the world, certain views of reality, what we should do, how we should live. One example that he gives is the old rule, study hard, go to school, study hard, get good grades, go to college, so you can get a good job, so you can work for a company for 40 years and you retire happy, and that's a good life. And that was sort of a prescription that was sent down through our culture to many of us, and that is changing rapidly today and has already changed for many, many people. But what he's talking about is actually consciously and intentionally taking on some of the rules that have been passed on to us, and he talks about them actually getting programmed into our bodies. So we end up automatically sort of thinking and behaving and choosing in certain ways, and actually looking at them honestly and challenging them. So it's not he's not saying just wholeheartedly just reject everything you've been taught. You got to be very strategic about it. You got to be very calculating, and you got to know which, he mentions it, the trick is knowing which rules to challenge and which rules not. And he also points out in the first two chapters that make up this part that we're really talking about changing your view of reality and changing it to a better view, a more positive view. It's really a transformation he's talking about. And he talks about how this can have very profound implications when you do this, when you see the world differently and you see through some of the myths and the misrepresentations that we are living in. It can change your whole life, and for some people that could be upsetting. It could foster other changes that could be upsetting to people around you. But that truly extraordinary people, and the ones that, and he's met many of them, a lot of them are associated with Mind Valley, almost every one of them has given themselves permission to buck the trend and go against some of the ways that society, most people in society think. It's funny, in the book he mentions that everything is up for grabs other than the laws of physics or the rules of physics and the rule of law. You should basically question everything. Well, even the rules of physics are up for grabs. In fact, when I was in the airport recently, flying back from Arizona, I got a copy of this book, The 7 Brief Lessons on Physics, which is, I believe, on the New York Times bestseller list. And this is a little 80-page book, but what it shows you is over the last 100 years, even the models of reality and truth about physics have changed dramatically, many times, in profound ways that have changed the worldview of most modern physicists today. And they're still changing. We're still in the process of evolving even better and better models of the world and taking the models we have and throwing them out and replacing them with better ones. And that's the process that Vishen is talking about in here. And the same process can happen for us personally. So I want to highlight two features of this. He's talking about transformation, and also he's in my own life, when I've had these kind of moments, and I mentioned in the first video that my ability to deal with stress in my life and to be now in a position where I can help other people was totally due to changing my entire understanding of stress as being different from what society had taught me. And going through medical school, being a science-based person, you find a lot of information about stress in the literature. There's hundreds and hundreds of self-help books written about stress, and almost all of them are starting from faulty perceptions. And they're not even aware of it. And once I was able to see through that, all the clouds and all the smoke and all the distortions about what stress really was for human beings and where it really comes from and why managing stress is really kind of crazy when you think about it. It's not a great strategy. It just deals with symptoms. It doesn't really help you solve your stress problems and get rid of them once and for all. That my whole world changed. So the whole thing about transformation is when you change a model of the world that society has given you, and you see the world differently and better, you never go back to seeing it the old way again, because you're you're just seeing more clearly what's always been the truth about how life works. It's not the ultimate truth, but it's a better version of the truth than the one that society had passed down to you. So that's one of the key hallmarks of a transformative change in a model of the world, is that it's better, it gives you more power and ability and freedom as a human being, gives you more joy and productivity and capabilities than you had in the old model, and it's so much better that you never go back to the old way. And then the second point I want to bring out is that when you have those kind of profound changes, it usually produces a ripple effect. You begin, once you have one of those moments, your first one, or one of several early ones, you start to wonder, my God, what else could I have been so wrong about? What other ideas do I have that have been, incorporated into me that I might not even be aware that I have, that's causing trouble in my life, and they're wrong too. So in my own life, once I saw through some of the myths and misconceptions about stress that are prevalent today, I realized there's a whole bunch of other stuff that I had false ideas about. I had to reevaluate my whole understanding of relationships, for example, because I used to have a lot of relationship conflicts and stress. And it's because I really had these models of how a relationship works, what a relationship is, and how you be successful at it. And they were all faulty. I had models of how communication works, and they weren't accurate. I used to have tremendous public speaking fear. And it wasn't until I realized that I had this internal model of what I thought public speaking was all about and how I thought public speakers are supposed to behave and prepare and all that all of that was false, and I didn't even know it. But and a lot of it was stuff that I made up in my own head. It wasn't necessarily that other people gave it to me. But it became a part of me. And every time I would be forced to give a talk, which I tried to avoid as much as I could, I would approach it out of that unseen model that was sort of in my subconscious that I wasn't even aware that I had, and I wasn't even aware of how faulty it was. And once I was able to bring it out into the open, realize it, and correct a lot of the misconceptions, my public speaking anxiety went away, and I now give public speaking presentations all the time. I enjoy it. I think it's one of the easiest, most enjoyable things that I do. I used to be a complete basket case. So I'm saying to you that what Vishen's talking about in this first part is not so easy to do. It's difficult for us to challenge everything that we're being told by society. But if you truly want to be extraordinary, it's one of the first things you have to learn how to do. And he gives a little guidance in the book about some principles you can use to try and figure out what types of rules and societal understandings you might want to look at, you might want to consider challenging. But basically, you're going to have to do that work yourself. You're going to have to find people that can help you identify, or perhaps help you identify which ones are worth challenging or not really valid, and then how to replace them with even better ones, and what the structure of those better models of the world are. Just as we did, in physics, when Newton's model of gravity went down, as gravity always does, it was replaced by Einstein's model, which is a better one. And now people are looking at Einstein's model and seeing if there's an even better one than that. But that's the whole idea of you got to get a really good model to replace the ones that you currently have. So we'll talk about part 2 tomorrow, and I'll see you then.